It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Countdown to reinstatement. It's still the thing. When I first heard that there were those who were believing that Trump could be reinstated, I thought it was a joke. I really did. And I thought, any rational, thoughtful person who knows anything about politics knows that there's literally no way for that to happen. There is no way for that to happen without there being a complete and total collapse of our entire democratic system. Everything would have to basically burn to the ground and be resurrected by a military coup, if you will. That's probably the only way that happens. That's the only way you install Donald Trump back in the White House. And at first I thought it was a joke. And I'm going, I'm sure there's some Q kooks. I'm sure that the Q folks were who maybe read a book from 100 years ago, thought, hey, this is possible. It's not. There's literally no way for that to happen. Yet I'm still getting stuff from people who believe it, still believe. And here's the weird part. Evidently, the former guy believes it too. Evidently, he's going around telling people that, gonna happen, gonna be back, and we're gonna be back, baby. Wow. Just wow. I mean, that's where I'm at. Now, the story that caught my attention today, Mike Pence gave a little spiel up in New Hampshire, and I guess this is why the Heritage Foundation is paying him a boatload of money to go around and just blather on like an idiot. But he did talk about January 6th, for like the first time. And he says, as I said that day, January 6th is a dark day in the history of the United States Capitol. But thanks to the swift action of the Capitol Police and federal law enforcement, violence was quelled. So, he's not on message here. Because understand, that was the January 7th message. He must not have gotten the recent talking points, which is there wasn't a riot. It was people, walking between the ropes. It was another day. It was Antifa. It was everything but them. Now, here's the weird part. It was his name being shouted out that the folks there wanted to wrap a rope around his neck and have him swing until the breath came out of him, until his feet shook and he dumped himself. That was his name. That wasn't somebody else's name. It was his name. So I got to think he's got a little different perspective. And as he points out, the former guy, he says, the former guy and I have spoken many times since we left office. And I don't know if we'll ever see eye to eye on that day. Really? You don't think you're going to see eye to eye? He's the guy who helped promote it and push it and egg those people on and direct them. And you're going to say, no, I wasn't on board with that. I would think you'd have a hard time with it. He says, but I will always be proud of what we accomplished for the American people. Those massive tax cuts for the very wealthy and corporations. The attacks on the ACA, the attacks on regulation, making workplaces less safe, going after and busting unions even more thanks to the Janus decision, basically throwing the country into chaos. He's proud of that. This is one of those statements where, to be honest, my first thought is, it sounds to me like, even he thinks he should have been hung. I mean, but here's where he then spins. And this is where he must have read a talking point, because he goes and says, I will not allow Democrats and their allies in the media to use one tragic day to discredit the aspirations of millions of Americans or to advance their radical agenda. And this is the Republican play right here. There's no more apologies for what happened on January 6th. They didn't mean it the first time. They're certainly not going to apologize again. All of that initial response was, I wonder how the polling's going to go. So we better come out and quell it early. We better come out and say we're against it. We don't want violence. We better do something. Even on that day, Trump came out and said, hey, you should go home now. Maybe a little too far. I know I riled you up. I know I got you all tingly in the panties and you went off like JoJo the idiot boy. But too much. Now that we're moving further and further away from it, and this is predictable, and we predicted this right after January 6th. It was predictable that the narrative would begin to change. And the blame game would be, it's all about the Democrats. And they would want to forget about this. Well, it's in the past. That was yesterday. Yesterday's in the past. We only got to think about the future. And this is where I was talking about yesterday, where Democrats, thank you, GOP, for not voting for the commission, should be firing up those select committees and investigate the previous administration and Mike Pence and Ivanka and Jared and Dumb Jr. and the idiot one and all of them, the whole crime syndicate, daily. There should be screaming headlines every day of what crime has been unearthed. Because here's the thing. This is what's gotten me. Do you remember back during the Benghazi era? Do you remember how every day there was a new smoking gun? Every day there was her emails. There was all this stuff. They even got her on the stand for 11 hours. And they never let up. Every day was another breaking story. Every day was, we've got more to look into. Every day was, and they didn't worry about the consequences. They didn't worry about what people thought, oh, you're overreaching. No, they beat the living tar out of Hillary Clinton. And it wasn't even her fault. It was theirs. What happened in Benghazi has as much to do with Hillary as it had to do with the Republicans and their screwquester and cutting the aid, the funding that they needed to defend that place. But you won't hear that. No, can't do that. Because that would mean Republicans were culpable. So I'm looking at this and I'm going, as we move further away from January 6th, that narrative keeps changing. And, well, that's in the past. We've got to worry about the radical Biden, the extreme liberal Joe Biden. The problem is that dog don't hunt. Because Biden has been boring as you know what. He's showed up. He's done his job. He's reached out at every opportunity. He's gone, hey, we'll not raise taxes on corporations if it means that we can get some infrastructure spending. Whatever. We're going to have meetings. We're going to sit down. We're going to do stuff. Keep reaching that hand out. And he has to because Joe Manchin's an idiot. And, of course, Dipsy Doo isn't much better at Kirsten Sinema. But I'm looking at this moment and going, where are those people who are going to push back, stand up and fight? Because I'll tell you right now, had this happen on a Democrat's watch, oh man, we would hear nothing but. Now understand, Cy Vance, DA in Manhattan, convenes a grand jury. We heard about it how many times? One news cycle. We haven't heard a thing since. Now, I haven't heard anything. Have you? We should be hearing about everything that's possible every single day. And this is where the right loves to say, liberal media. There's no liberal media, you morons. There's the corporate-controlled media. There's the moneyed media. And that moneyed media is, well, in the pockets of the cons. Because who has the money? The people who get the tax cuts. The people that the billionaires that we've created through a pathetic tax code that allows the very wealthy to walk away and pay a lower tax rate than their secretaries. That allows corporate America to not only pay zero taxes, but to actually get welfare back. How is it that a company that makes billions of dollars in profit actually gets money back? Like an earned income tax credit for corporate America. Like welfare for corporate America. It's crazy. Now, what's interesting to me is I keep having people tell me, "Well, Rick, you're getting all worked up. because, the GOP, they're going to collapse. Once Trump's gone, once, Trump's discredited, the party's going to correct itself. The good people, they're going to step forward. And look, there are a ton of other reasons people are throwing at me, mostly from Republicans who think that, somehow the party will right itself. I'm not buying it. These people have always been bullies. This party has always been the bully party. They've always been the party of bad ideas. Every bad idea that they've pursued, they've had to come back and explain again and again years later. They were against the civil rights movement. They were against regulation. They've deregulated virtually everything. They've given away trillions of dollars in wealth to the very wealthy. Their economic schemes are bad. Basically destroyed the wealthiest working class in the history of civilization and redistributed the wealth from working people to billionaires. But hey, those billionaires, they're smart. They know what to do with the money. And now what we're focused on Trump and being delusional. And look, I predicted it after the election that he was going to be fixated, obsessed with being a loser. History is going to remember Trump as a loser. Trump lost. Trump is a loser. He lost. That simple. End of sentence. And a sore loser. And that's the worst part of it. Look, you put up a fight, you do your best, you take your shots, you win, you lose. But to be that kid that refuses to shake hands after the game, or the kid that storms off crying and kicking and throwing stuff, that's our former president. That's the example that he's set for his followers. And his followers are that way too. They're the ones who are the Vince Lombardi folks. Win at any cost. Even if you have to cheat, which is what we're seeing in Arizona, what you're seeing in Georgia, what you're seeing across this country. Their ideas don't win with the American people. They lose by millions of votes in national elections because their ideas are bad. They have no agenda. In fact, they didn't even have a platform in the last election. The Republican Party platform was whatever Donald wants, whatever dear leader wants, whatever the supreme exalted leader could possibly want, we will defer to his wonderful judgment. Kind of like Kim Jong-il. Not so much but ill, most certainly. I'm surprised there aren't people out there saying, when Donald Trump goes golfing, he gets a hole-in-one every time. I mean, that's where they've elevated this guy to. And now we find out that he's going to go back on the speaking tour. The blog was a failure, which, anybody knows, sorry, not going to work. But he's talking about going back out onto the circuit. Now, understand, the story has evolved from just Trump coming back and being reinstalled in August. Evidently, David Perdue, the senator from Georgia, and Martha McSally, the Republican loser senator from Arizona, they're going to come back too. Going to get the old gang back together, kind of like a reunion tour. And then they're going to show those Democrats. And look, then they take over the Senate. And then, they figure out how to manipulate the House because they think, and this is part of the grand scheme of doing all these recounts, which is why there are Republican senators and representatives from Pennsylvania in Arizona looking at how they're trying to steal the election there, because they're going to bring that horrible idea back. They're going to bring the bamboo fantasy back here to Pennsylvania. And the idea is if they can just kick out a couple of, representatives who won close elections, they can take back the House, and then you will see how the Republicans run the steamroller. But it got me thinking when I heard this iteration of the grand reinstallation. I wonder what Christian Cinema thinks. I wonder what Christian Cinema thinks of Martha McSally, whom she defeated in the last election, being reinstated and replacing her this year. I wonder what she thinks. I wonder if she thinks, when things aren't working, you just change your behavior. We don't change the rules. You just change your behavior. Is your behavior just to go away now? Now, what's interesting to me is it's being reported that Trump is listening to, quote, the bottom of the crazies in the barrel. And I love that comment. He's listening to the bottom of the bottom, the scum on the bottom. That's what he's listening to. And who would that be? Turns out this whole reinstated in August thing is quite possibly the brainchild of Mike Lindell, the MyPillow guy. You go, exactly. This is the guy, most certainly the most trusted political advisor, a guy who's figured out how to take $1 billion corporation and going to end up losing all of it by the time the voting companies are done with him. The voting machine companies are done with him. It's just remarkable to me. And to think that these people were in power. And this is why I keep saying Democrats have to grow a spine and they have to investigate everything. Now, there are some folks who are going after Biden because Trump's presidential papers are at the National Archives. Biden doesn't have the ability to say, open those up. You're going to need an act of Congress. And that's why I keep coming back to Congress. If you want to change how things are done, if you want to, if you want transparency and accountability, you have to open that stuff up. We need to see those records. We need to know what was done in the last administration. And I know what the argument is. But Rick, if we do it to Trump, then Trump will do it to Biden. And this will be the new norm of we'll go after the previous president. And you go, yeah, potentially. If you're a criminal, I would hope that we would. If Joe Biden has committed crimes, which nobody at this point is at all even fantasizing about having happened, then yeah, he needs to be held accountable. We know the last guy committed crimes. He was impeached twice. We are now finding out more and more about what the administration did as to gathering information on reporters and listening to their phone calls and doing all kinds of craziness. This is the stuff you get from tin pot dictators. And oh, by the way, it was Antifa. It was all Antifa's fault. Wasn't the last guy. No. Clean as the fresh driven snow. Crazy stuff. I'll tell you, though, I would love to be a fly on Trump's wall just to see him going crazy. Gonna take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1934. That was the day striking Toledo auto light workers ratified an agreement securing a number of first gains. Workers won union recognition, wage increases, mechanisms to arbitrate grievances and demands, and the rehiring of all workers. National Guard troops were withdrawn 2 days later. It was truly a breakthrough in industrial organizing. Victory was ensured by a number of factors. Certainly, the 6-day running battles that killed 2 strikers and injured hundreds more had a profound impact. But by the end of May, 85 of the 103 unions affiliated with Toledo's Central Labor Union had voted in favor of a general strike. As well, the powerful Edison workers demanded raises and union recognition with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. Their business agent led the Committee of 23 that sought to organize the general strike in Toledo. On June 1st, 40,000 trade unionists amassed for a rally at Lucas County Courthouse Square, ready to strike. By then, the AFL had already appealed to President Roosevelt to intervene. Edison workers won big the next day with a 22% raise and union recognition. And then the tentative agreement was reached between Autolite and the UAW Local 18364. Historian Brian Palmer notes, these victories wrote finish to any mobilization for a general strike, but they paved the way for ongoing union victories in the automobile industry. Before the year was out, 19 more auto parts plants in Toledo would fall to union organizers. A General Motors plant was rocked with the first successful strike in the history of this corporate giant, the opening blow in what proved to be a long and taxing effort to establish trade unionism in the open shop bastions of the automobile industry.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I love the fact that you had Pennsylvania representatives in Arizona. You're looking for the bamboo. It's difficult to actually say that. I mean, it really is. I mean, it's so preposterous. It's so absurd. It's like a bamboo scavenger hunt. If you've seen the videos coming out of Arizona, where you got these Trump loyalists who have offered to do a free recount, where all it really is them trying to figure out how they can scam some money out of their supporters and figure out if there is a way that they can steal the next election. That's what, to me, this is really about. It's about finding any irregularity possible so you can exploit it and you can basically lose your mind over it. But what they're in the process of doing is that they're and this is some of the stories coming out of here. They're destroying ballots. They've screwed up the machines. The Maricopa County executive is saying, hey, look, we might not be able, we can't use these machines ever again. That's the end of it. It just ain't happening. Because now they're in these machines. And I don't know who was the genius who said, oh yeah, let's give a bunch of loyalists and ideologues, some of them who were at the Capitol on Insurrection Day, let's give them direct access to all of the ballots and all of the machinery and the entire system. Let's hand it over to them. And then let them bring in someone called Cyber Ninja. You go, what? And look, the Republicans around the country are watching to see what's going on, because this is potentially going to be the new normal. When you get a loser in chief like the last guy, he's going to throw a temper tantrum, going to throw a fit. You're going to see this kind of, because they have the money. Jill Stein, I'm not a fan of hers, but she was pushing to have a recount of the last election, the 2016 presidential election. She couldn't get the money to it. Had that been a way, had Hillary Clinton won by the margins that Trump did, I guarantee you there would have been money for a recount. 2, 3, 4 times over, 5 times, until they got it right. And that's what we're seeing in Arizona, which is why it's concerning to me that you're seeing someone like Senator Doug Mastriano from Franklin County, Pennsylvania, going to Arizona. Why he's in Arizona, I have no idea. Maybe to try and pick up some pointers on how to find bamboo in paper. I don't know. But this is a guy who was at the insurrection. He was one of them. He held that kangaroo hearing in Gettysburg, with the famous phone call of Donald Trump, basically, screaming and ranting into the microphone over the phone, where they brought in all of these experts, quote unquote experts, from all across the Commonwealth, and they made up all of these stories. There were all these things, all of them, tons of stuff. The guy who was driving stuff around, the guy who they all had flash drives. They all had things. You know what's interesting? And I keep coming back to this. Do I doubt anything is possible? No, I don't. I never doubt anything is possible. But the one thing that I do believe in, and I maybe I'm naive. Maybe some of my conservative friends go, "Wow, that's because you're naive." Maybe so. I do believe that attorneys who have licenses and understand that when they lie under oath, it's a crime and they can go to jail and lose their license and ultimately lose their prestige in their home and their savings and their families, and basically being a bum on Skid Row if you get caught, that when they go into the courtroom, what they present is factual. What they present is true. Now, look, there's a difference between holding a kangaroo hearing in a hotel ballroom with a bunch of knotheads screaming at each other. That's one thing, because that was not under oath. You didn't hear anyone say, I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. So help me God. No one did that. No one. Now, when they go into the court of law, the person in the robe kind of demands it. You got one of those people who walk around with it in an official kind of police-looking uniform. What do they call them? Bailiffs? It's got one of those walking around going, hey, put your hand on the book, swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. Under penalty of perjury, where we can throw your sorry, bitter little hillbilly behind in jail. And you didn't see it happen. And for me, this is where I go back to this moment where all of the rhetoric, all of the nonsense, all of the shenanigans, all of the tall tales, all the anecdotal tales, all of that stuff means nothing to me. What did you bring in front of the person in the robe when you put your hand on the book and you swore? You brought none of it. So it tells me none of the kangaroo court stuff was true. Not even true enough that you believed it to bring it into a court of law. Nowhere. Now, they've brought their scanners in to check the paper because we're going, maybe we can slip some bamboo in there. Which you go, how'd you figure that one out? Oh, because the Chinese. Now, here's the weird part. I personally would not be surprised if there were Chinese sheets of paper in there. Given the fact that our manufacturing capacity is so pathetic and that we're so reliant on goods from China, would not surprise me if there was some bamboo paper. Surprisingly, there hasn't been. And they were so looking forward to that they actually brought in a special black light just so they could look for bamboo. And now you've got Senator Mastriano down there figuring out how he can bring those horrible ideas back here. And here's the weird part. And this is the part that's most interesting to me. There are those in the Q-Kook community who believe that, let's say Georgia finds 13,000 votes. Let's say, Wisconsin finds, X amount of votes, and Pennsylvania finds X amount of votes. And now you've gone, no, we have found and we've excluded, and we've done all these things to finally get the result that we've wanted. We've counted it again and again and again. We've done a little 3-card money. We've done a little disappearing of ballots over here. We question the signatures. Oh, there's a check mark instead of a circle. Circle gets the square kind of thing. Once you do all of that, you finally get rid of enough ballots. Then you go, now our guy won. There's no way of going back to uncertify what has been certified. This is the interesting part. It's over. On January 6th, when the Capitol Police saved Mike Pence's behind, kept his neck out of the noose, when that happened, eventually they went back to their work of certifying Joe Biden as president of the United States. There's no reinstating. There's no going back. There's no uncertifying elections. Sorry, that's not going to happen. But what this is, and what we're seeing there, is really all about figuring out what rhetoric they're going to use to convince the faithful that the elections were stolen and to justify whatever draconian measures that they come up with to rig the next election and the next election. Where I'm at in Pennsylvania, a Republican has a hard time winning a statewide election. They do. The numbers are not on their side. There are only so many angry white guys out there. And their numbers, unfortunately for them, are dwindling. So they have to figure out how it is that they suppress the vote. And you go back to 2010, when Tom Corbett was asked about, what he thought his chances were. Well, if we can keep the vote down in Philadelphia, we got a good chance. which is what they did. And during that 2010 election, what they did, some of the dirty tricks and shenanigans that went on is they would send cars with tinted windows that look like police cars to the black polling precincts and sit them out front and have guys with suits hang out and do all kinds of things to intimidate people. They were doing as much as they could to purge people. They were doing everything they can do to make sure that you limit people's ability to exercise the franchise. Because what Republicans understand more than anyone, when everyone votes, their chances of winning goes down. Paul Weyrich understood this back in 1980 when he said, how many of you want everyone to vote? I don't want everyone to vote, he said. Our leverage goes down as the voting populace goes up. Meaning the more of us that get to vote, the better off for us if we can keep their numbers down. It goes back to something my high school government teacher said. When we said, don't bother, when you turn 18, don't bother to register to vote. Don't bother to vote. This way, my vote is much stronger. You don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're talking about. Just stay home. Save yourself a trip. Don't bother participating. Now, obviously, he was being sarcastic because he encouraged everyone to vote, everyone to be engaged and educated and informed on the issues. And he was a crazy Reaganite. I wish I could go back to that day and go back to him now. If I doubt he's still alive, and go back to him now and go, you still think that way? After everything that's happened in this country, after the massive redistribution of wealth, after the attack on public education by your ilk. Now, as I said, Mastriano and company, they're going to try and figure out how they can do the same thing here at home. Because Mastriano has a fancy that he's going to be the next governor. That his fantasy is he's the next Trump. And I'll tell you, someone like him scares me. Because I view him as one of those military kind of leaders that could easily be one of those not so benevolent dictators. And understand, in Pennsylvania, if we get someone like Doug Mastriano as governor in 2022, bad things are going to happen for this state. Immediately, you'll see a no rights at work bill pass through. Immediately, you'll see bigger tax cuts for corporations. Immediately, you'll see slash and burn to education. Immediately, you'll see more privatization of education. Immediately, you'll see social services going down the tube. They will show you how to run the machine. They will show you how to run that steamroller. And this is where I have a problem with the Democrats, a lot of Democrats, because understand, the Republican Party is a homogenous party. They're a bunch of angry white people, really, for the most part. They have some minorities, and it's purely economic. They have some others, so to speak, but it's mostly angry white people who have done pretty well, who the country has done pretty well for. And they're ruthless. They want more. It's never enough. Greed is good. The one who has the most toys when they dies wins. That's their mentality. Me. They're the 2-year-old party. The angry old 2-year-old party. Who they never get enough. They never get their way often enough. And they're going to kick and scream and they're going to do everything that they can possibly think of to get their way. And then you've got the Democrats, who are a multiracial, multi-ethnic, multi-everything party, who try to be everything to everyone at every moment, which is why things constantly break down. Hard to herd the cats, so to speak. And they have to figure out how their coalitions work together. They're not as ruthless. In fact, they're not ruthless at all, because they're too busy eating each other than going after the real problem, which is a homogenous Republican Party hell bent on domination for their interests. So for me, this is one of those moments where I'm hoping Democrats are listening. I'm hoping Democrats are waking up in this moment. Now, look, Joe Manchin has already said, and this is heartbreaking to me, because we need a big, bold, visionary infrastructure plan. Joe Manchin and Kelly Sinema are leaving our children in a much, much more dangerous position by not addressing climate change, by not addressing the needs of our infrastructure, by not addressing healthcare and education and all of the things that we need to be doing. And we needed to have been doing 10 years ago. But Joe Manchin has come out and said, look, the only infrastructure bill he's going to vote for will have to be a bipartisan bill. Now, Manchin comes from a state that's received a D in infrastructure from the American Society of Civil Engineers. They're at a D. They're below the rest of the nation. His state needs more work than just about anybody else. His constituents need the jobs, need the infrastructure. The state needs the investment. But he's hell-bent on some vision of purity, some vision of high-minded, well, the Senate is the upper chamber, and we have rules for a reason. Kind of the same ridiculous nonsense you got out of Kelly Sinema, which is where I think she probably got it. I don't think she understands what he was saying, but it sounded good. You know, we don't need to change the rules. We just need to change our behavior. I don't even know what that means. When you're dealing with someone who is as ruthless as the Republican Party is and has been, how do you change your behavior? Is what she means more of what Democrats have been doing for the last 30 years, of changing their behavior and continually compromising and moving further and further to the right? You know, I always look at it, the Republican goes to a Democrat on, I need both your legs. We got to cut off both your legs. There's just no way we can get anything done without both your legs. And the Democrat goes, no, you can't have them both. Just take one. Okay. The Republican goes, okay, I'll take the one. 6 months later, they come back, we need the other one. Well, just take it up to the knee. Okay, we'll take it up to the knee. 6 months later, they eventually get what they want because they continually stay, they continually push, they continually demand, they continually threaten. Democrats haven't figured that out yet. And you go, at some point, the hope is that they wake up. Is it going to be this election cycle, or is it going to be after the bloodbath that's going to come in 2022 if they get nothing done? Scary, scary times. And here's the other part. While we're infighting, while we're gridlocked, while we're struggling to do anything, the Chinese are growing stronger every day. And in fact, just yesterday we talked about the fact that Chinese state media is talking about the next nuke race. And when we come back, we're going to talk about what a muscular Chinese nuclear program would look like for the world. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1900. That was the day that the International Lady Garment Workers Union was formed in New York City by 7 local unions. While men held nearly all of the leadership roles in the early days of the union, most of the workers were Jewish women. One woman who rose through the ranks of the union's leadership was Fanya Kohn. She was a Russian Jewish immigrant who worked as a sleeve maker. She helped to organize an ILGWU local at her workplace in New York. By 1916, she was elected as a vice president for the union. She was the first woman to hold that position. She made labor education programs her top priority, helping to found a workers' university at Washington Irving High School. Distinguished professors visited and gave lectures. In 1920, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics called the school, quote, the first systematic scheme of education undertaken by organized labor in the United States. Fanya expanded her educational efforts on the East Coast from Boston to Philadelphia, and to the West as far as Cleveland and Chicago. In 1919, 800 members had taken part in one of the courses. Classes included subjects such as public speaking, health, and literacy. Fania helped to found the Brookwood Labor College in New York, the first residential workers' college in the United States. Fania often met with obstacles within her union. She believed workers deserved a broad education that included stimulating culture and intellectual content. Many of the male leaders in the union wanted more narrow education focused on union matters. Despite this opposition, the ILGWU became an important force for social justice unionism within the United States labor movement. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I find it interesting that a lot of my lefty friends are like, no, Rick, you're being too hard on China. We don't want to be confrontational. We need to get along. And I'm going, again, this is where the left, this is where Democrats, this is where you're getting it wrong. You can't deal with people who don't want to be dealt with. You can't change your behavior enough. You can't give enough. You can't agree to enough. They'll take it all. And yesterday when I saw Chinese state media saying that it's time to start preparing for nuclear war with the U.S., I'm like, well, we've now reached that point where we've given everything that they think they can get out of us. And here to share some thoughts on, am I being hyperbolic? Am I wrong? I've asked our good friend Emily de la Bruyere to come talk with us. She's the co-founder of Horizon Advisory, their website, horizonadvisory.org. Emily, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me.
So am I getting this wrong? I see this story, Chinese state media. We need to get more muscular. We need to start thinking about nuclear war with those Americans. I don't know how else you take that other than now we've gotten everything we can get.
Yeah, and your framing, the initial framing of the U.S. just wanting to cooperate at all costs and keep giving the chocolate bar to the bully, I think that's the best framing that there is for this. Because like the Chinese statement, the state media article is coming largely in response to the Biden administration saying that we need an investigation into COVID-19's origins. And they don't mean it. China doesn't think that there's a war coming with the U.S. They don't want a war with the U.S., at least right around now, and they certainly don't expect a nuclear war. But they're trying to scare us because, this is horizontal escalation. It's trying to bully us. It's saying we're going to raise the stakes in a different domain so that you back down. And this is something that China is so good at doing. And precisely because of what you said, it's probably going to work because we're so bad at confrontation.
Yeah,
because the U.S. doesn't know how to compete anymore. We're so preoccupied with stability and the normative good of cooperation and off-ramps and de-escalation that the second China raises the stakes, we go hide in a corner.
And this is where as much as I hate it, this is where I give the former guy a little bit of credit. He was crazy enough, unpredictable enough that this might not have worked. And it may not work on Joe Biden. I'm hoping it hasn't. He hasn't pulled back on the tariffs. He hasn't done a lot of the things that I was afraid he was going to do. I think he's been pretty good so far. But when I see this coming out of Chinese state media, and understand, you know better than I do, that anything that comes out of Chinese state media has the full blessing and backing of the Chinese Communist Party. They didn't just write this on their own. But that's where I give credit to the last guy, because as much as I hate it, is that I don't think they would have done that. Yes,
and Biden has backbone, might not cave either, but regardless, like the narrative in the U.S. and has an effect is going to be, oh wait, you can't have that risk. What's good and what's always going to be a normative good is that we calm things down. And as long as that's the narrative in the U.S., then China plays us like a goddamn fiddle.
Yeah, and again, keep stealing our chocolate bar, to use your line. Because, my problem is you've got so many people, especially I look at the Democrats, and I'm looking at this moment That whole frame. I'm sure you remember it from 2016 when when they go low, we go high. As where I was going, no, that's really pretty stupid. When they go low, you stomp their face into the ground so that they don't do it again. This is one of those moments for me.
Yeah, you don't keep giving your chocolate bar to the bully and expect he's going to behave better because he's going to be all hyped up on the chocolate, and that's only going to fuel the whole process.
But let me go back to where my frame was from the beginning, because I'm seeing this as a moment of maybe the Chinese think that they've gotten what they can get. Because so far, Biden's policies have been talking about reshoring manufacturing, investing in new technologies that China thought, hey, they had the corner on the market on, that there is some bipartisan. And I'm shocked a lot of times when we can talk about anything bipartisan, but there is some bipartisan thought on we've got to take on China in this moment because they've gotten too muscular. Our supply chains are too weak. And I think the pandemic really did highlight that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the pandemic, the ripple effects of the pandemic that we're seeing now, that there are no commodities available for us anywhere. And that's not just like some act of God accident. There's a clear distortion taking place. And I mean, I also do read this though. Beijing sees that there is a tipping point in terms of American thinking and American rhetoric on China. We're not yet necessarily at a tipping point in action. And so escalatory moves like this now, in Beijing's calculus, have the possibility to stop us or to neuter our action at this critical moment where we could have the transfer from saying the right thing to doing the right thing.
Now, one of the things that I said all during the former guy's years is that he left us vulnerable internationally. And I believe that he broke long-standing alliances that we had or strained them. He left voids in places that we should have been filling, that China then went and filled in Africa and Latin America and other places that I think we should have been active in. My concern is there are so many that want to stay out of international politics. And look, I'm kind of the guy too. We shouldn't have military bases in 193 countries around the world. We shouldn't be involved in everyone's affairs. But, and here's the big giant but, I don't want China filling that spot. I don't want the Chinese to have the kind of global control that the world says that we have and have them misuse it the way I see them doing in their country with the kind of data collection and surveillance and the kind of policies that we've seen. Again, I ask, with you being the expert, am I being hyperbolic or over concerned? Am I going too far here?
No, not at all. And I think there are like two key points here. The first is we don't want to be the world's policeman. That's a terrible job to have.
Right.
But we really don't want China to be governing the global order because they're a terrible, irresponsible actor. Also a totalitarian, authoritarian state promoting an abusive regime internationally. The second beat, though, is just like there is no longer in our global system the same kind of distinction between domestic and international presence that there used to be. And China's realized this. Like you read this throughout Chinese discourse where they say that there's globalization, there's information technology, there are international value and supply chains. And that means that the global system is also the domestic system and vice versa. So hundreds of military bases, that's one thing, but there's also the fact that like, what are we going to do about the idea that we need commodities for electric vehicles that are consolidated in Africa? And China is the one investing in the mines in Africa, and that means that our entire industry depends on China. What are we going to do about the fact that an iPhone supply chain covers how many different countries, and we can't produce that unless we have enough influence over those countries? And China has pulled them away because that's what China's trying to do. That they're going to cooperate with us industrially and technologically and according to our rules and systems. And our entire economic system depends on this now. Our entire social system depends on this now. And we don't really have a choice, especially because China sees it as zero sum. And China has diagnosed all of this and is out there competing for the international positions of leverage that are going to allow it to rip apart or control the foundation on which our system is built.
Well, the reason I bring that up is because, there was a story not too long ago about Apple's, practices in China. the kind of data control, the kind of censorship, the kind of things that they're doing there that they can't do here. And you see now recently, just the other day, Huawei has come out with their own 5G system and their own iOS operating system that they're going to be running outside of Google and all of that. We're in this weird world where very easily everything that we worry about privacy, everything that we know, everything we see, everything we do, everything that is us is now owned and operated solely by the Chinese Communist Party. That is freaky scary.
Yeah, absolutely. And also all of the things that we count, when we're counting up our positioning versus that of China, we have these things that we assume are our assets. And it just doesn't cross our mind that maybe these aren't our assets anymore. And take Apple as the example. China's regulatory regime means that it has to localize local Chinese data in China. And so it does, because it wants the Chinese market. We have nothing resembling that kind of control over domestic data companies. And so where do we count Apple at that point? Where do we count Tesla? Because Tesla is doing the same thing with its data in China. And if you look at China's regulations, ultimately so is going to every single company that's in what China considers to be a strategic or sensitive domain.
Yeah,
and we've already seen this with, we're talking about data companies, but we've seen it with manufacturing companies as well. They want the Chinese market, and so they outsource. And we consider them to be like the jewels in the American crown. But at what point are we just renting them and China owns them?
Yeah, and ultimately, the rules of the road there aren't the same rules that they are here. And I say it all the time. I have almost no concern for intellectual property rights for corporations that go to China. I don't. You made the choice. You gambled. You rolled the dice. You got ripped off. That's your problem. You want your intellectual property secure. There's a place for that. You're right here. It's I don't know how else to go with that, but anytime you hear a Republican, especially a Republican, and a lot of Democrats talk about trade with China, it's all about intellectual property. That's where I'm more concerned about currency manipulation, mistreatment of workers, use of slave labor, destruction of our environment. You go down those lists, that's where I'm concerned. But boy, I know a lot of people, intellectual property, that's all we care about.
Yeah, and but meanwhile, it's the two sides of it. It's that they are using slave labor in their supply chains. And so we're consuming goods that are made with slave labor. That's real bad. But it's also, I just want to go back to the data thing. China has realized that today's competition is, to a significant extent, just about having a data advantage. And they treat information as a production factor. And that's just a really basic element of thinking. And they're like, we want all of the information. And it's not just that it's IP. It's not just that we're going to use it to spy or to hack. It's that taken together, this is what power is today. And they are out there actively, deliberately, from the point of design, harvesting and aggregating it.
No,
we don't think that way.
No, it's incredible, and you it's even little things. I don't know if you saw the John Cena video. He made the mistake of saying something about Taiwan, and now he's got to go learn Mandarin Chinese to apologize. You go, that's the power of the Chinese Communist government, because they could cut them completely off, and he had to. As much as a big tough guy as he is, contractually, he didn't have a choice, which is why I didn't beat him up.
Or, let's go back to what we started with. The Biden administration says we should have an investigation into the origins of a pandemic that has killed 3.7 million people and more than 500,000 Americans. And 18 months later, we should look into it. And China says, no, let's go nuclear.
No, and this is, again, I didn't take a position on whether it was deliberately released or accidentally released or who knows how or where it came from. All I was talking about during the whole pandemic is how do we get it under control? How do we get out from under this? There's time for all to go back and point fingers. How do we get through it was my first thing. Now I think you do have to go back and hold somebody accountable for this, whether it was intentional or it was accidental, or someone stole the fish, who stole the rat, who stole the bat, or who knows what, or some minor got it months before. I do think you have to know for a couple reasons. One, accountability and to hold someone responsible, and two, to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Yes, and who knows whether it leaked from the Wuhan Institute of Virology or not. But we do know that China did hold back really important information on the virus, on its origins, on its spread from the beginning. And that means that we don't today have the kind of information we would need in order to ensure that this doesn't happen again. And that's really bad. And the fact that it hasn't been an investigation into that yet, that's really sad. I mean, it's disrespectful to the victims of COVID.
Yeah.
These are millions of people, including healthcare workers in China, who stood up and tried to blow the whistle, who deserve an investigation into how this all went so wrong.
Yeah, and look, this is another one of those moments you point out to people who tried to blow the whistle. A lot of them, I understand, disappeared.
Exactly. Yes. And I mean, if you had a family member who's disappeared and you don't have an investigation into that, and it takes 18 months for the police to say, oh, wait, let's actually look at the crime scene. And then when that happens, the people who ripped all the data away, all the evidence away from the crime scene say, actually, if you look into this, we're going to firebomb the police office. Not an awesome situation to be in.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, I'm a kid who grew up during the Cold War. I remember the 70s and into the 80s. I remember Reagan's Star Wars. I remember, as a kid, go underneath the desk. There might be a bomb scare. Like our desks were magic, could keep us safe from nuclear fallout. But I remember that, and I remember going, you can't trust the Russians, or at the time it was the Soviets. I can't imagine, someone going back then and said, oh, hey, by the way, our biggest trading partner is going to be a communist nation who's going to adhere to capitalist principles, and they're going to basically steal all of our stuff, and we're going to be okay with it. I can't imagine what 30 years ago, if someone would have told me that, what I would have said.
Yeah, and we're going to depend on them for the critical inputs for our strategic industries, and that's going to be great because cooperation is always good.
Yeah. So let me ask you last line of questioning, because, again, I'm happy so far. You and I think, talked right at the beginning when Joe Biden said, China's not a threat. They're not our problem. There was a whole bunch of things he went on that I was really worried about, that we were going to have Obama 2.0. Thus far, I think as I said, I think he's done really well. What are you paying attention to over these next couple of months to see what the administration's going to do to signal where you think things are going to end up?
Yeah. So Biden and this administration have said all of the right things, and that's huge. And I mean, we talked about this, and the last time I was on, grinning ear to ear, could not have been happier. Now I am starting to look around and say, okay, we're 6 months in, where's the action? And so much of the action that's taken place so far seems to be a continuation of Trump-era policies and not anything new. And those policies were inadequate to begin with. So continuation of them already really not enough. And then in some cases, even that continuation feels like it's a shrinkage. And that has me worried. The two areas probably that I'm most focused on, and they're probably the reason I'm fired up right now. The Trump administration, the DOD was documenting this list of Chinese military companies. Chinese companies operating in the US with ties to the Chinese military. And today, Biden came out with an executive order that continues this list-making process and added a couple companies, but also took out a handful of them without explanation, including ones that matter and do have ties to the Chinese military. The one that comes to mind is CRRC, which is a Chinese rail company, right. Very real ties to the Chinese military, and it happens to be building transit systems all across the US. So this is infrastructure and it's Chinese military, and there was action. How can we be going backwards on that? And then the other thing that has me worried is the human rights stuff. Where is the action on forced labor? Where is the action on forced labor in the solar industry and across the actual strategic industries that are important for this administration? And that if they're going to be building back better, really should not be building on slave labor.
I'm right there with you. Emily, I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff. I appreciate it. I hope you'll come back and talk to us again real soon.
Thank you for having me.
Good stuff. Our good friend Emily de la Bruyere, co-founder of the Horizon Advisory. Make sure you check out their website, horizonadvisory.org. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
Hello, I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. A union of over 1.4 million strong and growing, AFSCME is gaining improvements in the workplace all across America. And right here in the Commonwealth, more than 95,000 AFSCME members make Pennsylvania happen. Highways, libraries, hospitals, parks, offices, prisons, classrooms, museums, courtrooms. You'll find AFSCME members at work in all these places and many more.
I make Pennsylvania happen every day.
I make Pennsylvania happen every day.
Today's AFSCME members take on public service jobs as diverse as they are, not for the recognition, but for a better Pennsylvania. For more information, please visit our website at AFSCME13.org. Labor is changing, so is your labor union. We are AFSCME.
We make Pennsylvania happen!
When Donald Trump declared he would fix the U.S. Postal Service, he was using the word fix the same way veterinarians do when you bring in your dog. Trump wasted an inordinate amount of his presidential power and prestige in a failed attempt to neuter an agency that literally delivers for the people. Extraordinary postal workers move our letters and packages by truck, car, airplane, boat, motorbike, mule, and of course by foot, to any address across town or across the country. Both essential and effective, it's the most popular federal agency, with 91% of the public approving its work. Thus, an uproar of protest killed Trump's attempt to gut it. When it comes to bad public policy, however, failure is just a way of saying, let's try the back door. Trump was defeated, but he left behind an undistinguished Postmaster General named Louis DeJoy, who had only 2 qualifications for the job. He was a Trump mega-donor, and he was a peer of corporate powers that have long wanted to privatize the Postal Service. In March, before the new Biden presidency had taken charge of the postal system, DeJoy popped through the back door with his own 10-year plan to fix the agency. Rhetorically, his plan promised to, quote, achieve service excellence by making mail delivery more consistent and reliable. How? By consistently cutting service and reliably gouging customers. Specifically, DeJoy proposed to close numerous mail processing facilities, eliminate jobs, reduce post office hours of service, and cut the standard of delivering our first-class mail from 3 days to 5. Oh, also raise stamp prices. This is Jim Hightower saying delivering lousy service at higher prices is intended to destroy public support, opening up the service to takeover by private profiteers. And who gets joy from that? The Hightower Radio Lowdown is brought to you by the Lowdown Happy Hour, live streamed from the Chat and Chew Cafe. Details at hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I gotta tell you, I'm still enjoying the delusion. And I love the comment that Trump's listening to the bottom of the crazy barrel. I still think that's a good line. Because look, and at the bottom obviously being Mike Lindell, the CEO of the MyPillow guy. When he comes up with a conspiracy theory, it's way out there. So I've got it on. No one's told me which day in August, but I've got August 1st circled on the calendar so that we can then have the countdown to reinstallation of the former guy. And here to share some thoughts on what reinstallation would look like. Would Melania come back in and change the drapes? I don't know. There's never been done before. But here to share some thoughts, our good friend Sarah Burris. Sarah's a reporter over at RawStory, rawstory.com, their website. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
Happy Thursday.
So the former guy's coming back. They're going to reinstall him. Not just him. He's also David Perdue, the senator from Georgia, and Martha McSally from Arizona. So we finally can get rid of Christian Dipsy Dude Cinema.
Another word for reinstall is coup d'etat. Couldn't help but notice, you can't reinstall someone or move someone out and someone else in without there being a coup, and that's not coup.
That's not coup. I'm with you. But isn't there? Did they add the new reinstallation clause right under the Commerce Clause somewhere? Wasn't that somewhere near there? near the repeal of the emoluments clause. Was there something there?
There is no reinstallation clause. There is no installation clause, for that matter. There is no installing. There is no Lowe's coming to put your fridge together. There is nothing. So it's, I think the former guy desperately wants to believe that somehow he can regain power and thus he can't be sued and hauled into court or testify before a grand jury. But the reality is it's just not going to happen. And I think the thing that scares me the most is this idea that a bunch of people are talking about a coup, and then Trump brings up this idea of August and specifically, talks about how something is happening in August and he'll be reinstalled in August, which to me is just him saying, okay, guys, the coup is happening in August. So that is sort of what made me think, I think I'm going to go on vacation in August.
Yeah,
I think I'm going to leave town.
Yeah, no, I want to be there for the coup. That's history in the making. I want to see how this plays out, because they say he's going back on tour. He's going to start doing rallies and speeches, and it's going to get the old gang back together.
Which I think is a brilliant idea. I think one of the most important things that Donald Trump can do to remind people of how awful the last 4 years were is to remind people how awful the last 4 years were. And I just feel like there is, in the last several months, there's been a sort of collective sigh of relief. I don't wake up in the morning and check Twitter right away. I don't, a lot of us don't have to worry about, not paying attention to the news for a Saturday. So there is this sense of
normalcy.
Of contentment, of casual relaxation that I did not experience for 4 years. And this idea that Donald Trump thinks that somehow he's going to be able to convince millions of Americans who didn't really want to have anything to do with him, several months ago, that somehow he is better now. Good luck with that. Yeah. I don't think it's going to work.
No, it'll be one of those things where we'll go away for a long weekend, take a Friday off, and by Monday he'll be reinstalled, and you'll go, hey, how'd that happen? Because we weren't paying attention to Twitter and everything else. That's what he's playing on. That's part of the conspiracy. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I think I wonder if he's associating this with the idea that he had about his blog, where he thought for sure that he was starting something huge and new, and he was going to be able to distribute his message to millions and circumvent the suspensions on Twitter and all of these things. And that lasted for 29 days. So I'm curious to see how long this actual rally thing lasts.
Yeah, no, I think he'll do rallies as long as he can get people to show up and feed his ego. I think he'll do tons of those.
But that's the thing, is how many people are going to show up? Like, if you don't have a full-time staff, like his campaign was, busing people in, trying to get people there, working really, really hard to get people signed up. I wonder how many people, it makes me think about what happened in Tulsa. Or is anybody going to show up? Is this going to be waiting for Godot, where he just sits on the stage and he's like, okay, hey guys, and there's like 5 people there. How long will that last? If he has like just 100 people that show up at like a massive rally site and it basically looks like a competition at a county fair for the fanciest hog.
It reminded me of Rick Santorum. You just reminded me of Rick Santorum when he ran for president. He had a campaign stop where there were like 5 news media people there, and 1 person showed up.
Those are my favorite. Whenever anybody has more media than they do supporters, oh, that one's brutal.
That is brutal.
And sometimes that happens in like New Hampshire or Iowa, where you have like just a couple of people at a house party or something like that. But, if you're having like a rally, you're having like a large gathering and 1 dude shows up, that's just embarrassing. Well,
it'll be interesting to see because, no, look, I think he still has some pull power. I still think you have enough crazy people who will most certainly, climb mountains to get to him. And I still think he has, a massive pull in the party, which is why they haven't taken him on. And the other side of this, I think even if he goes away, I don't think the party snaps back to normal. I think they're forever now broken, and I think they're going to get worse. And I said this in 2016. I said when he's not my real concern. He's going to be horrible. He's going to do terrible things. He's going to break the law. There's going to be criming going on. But he's not going to be the one that normalizes that. It's the next guy. I worry about someone like Josh Hawley, who is every bit as bad, but could be the one who normalizes that behavior. And we end up really on the wrong path.
And it isn't just Josh Hawley. It is all of them.
Ron DeSantis.
This idea that every single person in the House, and you hear Republicans, anti-Trump Republicans, who are openly saying, look, everyone tells me that they're terrified of Donald Trump and what he might tweet about them, even though he doesn't even have a Twitter anymore. And I also love, by the way, that we have turned criming into a verb. That is just amazing to me. But this idea that all of these Republicans are so weak and fragile that they can't even stand up to Donald Trump. Like, what is wrong with you? How sad is this? What kind of snowflake are you that you're not even brave enough to stand up for, yourself?
And a perfect example of that. Perfect example of that. The general here in my neck of the woods, Representative Scott Perry, who bailed through the woods over hill and on dale to get away from answering some questions from the local news media, who understand we are in central Pennsylvania. This is one of the reddest areas in the country. The news media wasn't going to beat him up. They simply were going to ask him the question and throw it out there and let him answer however he wanted. So they're going to say, what happened on January 6th? And Scott Perry would go, it was a uproar. It was a rally of good God-fearing patriots, and Antifa attacked the Capitol. And our local media go, oh, okay, thank you. I don't know why he ran.
That's basically what happened too, is that the CBS reporter that inadvertently ended up chasing the guy wanted to ask him about his bill to help soldiers, veterans with PTSD, which I think is something that we can all sort of come together on. And what a fluff question. And so this idea that he took one look at the reporters and literally made a beeline through the forest, over the river, through the woods, and was like hiding out in a parking lot. And so the reporter and the camera guy were just like, well, we're parked up there. So they sort of trotted up there and they were like, hey, Congressman. He was like, did you guys follow me up here just to ask me a question? And they were like, no, we actually just parked right there.
See, it would be me go, yes. Why did you run from me? That's my first question. Why did you run?
I think it makes a more interesting story, the fact that he continues to run. And maybe it's just like, these reporters are not going to ask something that is really mind blowing, right? It's exactly like what you said. They're going to ask what your favorite color is, or how was your day, Congressman? It's not going to be something really important that Americans actually want to know the answers to. So why is he running? Like, what is it that he's trying to hide? Is it, does he have like a big scary mole on his chin? I don't understand. Like, why is this the thing? What are you hiding? Because there's nobody who's going to do anything bad to you. Yet he goes on CNN and CNBC and C-SPAN and all of these guys. So, but he ignores his people back home. It just seems really stupid.
Yeah, one of the greatest things about Scott Perry, we reached out to him to have him come on the show, and I've had him on the show in the past when he was in the state house, especially when he destroyed the unemployment compensation law here in our state when he was in the state house. I reached out to him recently to have him come on because a listener sent me a podcast of the big station, the big right-wing talk station here. He was on the day Rush Limbaugh died, and he admitted that he listens to this show. And I wanted to have him come on and say, hey, thanks for that. He goes, I don't agree with him. I don't agree with him at all. And of course the host is going, yeah, of course not. No one possibly could. But I thought it was interesting. So if you're listening, Scott, I've got some questions. I would love to have you come on and answer them. Starting with, why did you run? They weren't going to ask you a tough question. They weren't me.
I'd be curious to ask him, what some of his favorite hiking trails are.
That one.
And and if he plans on defunding the entire national park. But there are a lot of questions I think that we could ask Scott. If only he was brave enough to do it.
Yeah, no, he was one of those. He was one of the first ones to do the virtual town halls, and stop doing the in-person town halls. Not well before the pandemic. It was one of those things. Well, we just don't want people upset. Now, one of the things I gave Arlen Specter credit for, and I was not an Arlen Specter fan by any stretch of the imagination, but Arlen Specter, he went into those places and took the yelling and screaming, which got the greatest line in the history of town halls. That idiot from Lebanon who was going, "You get your government hands off my Medicare!" Greatest line ever.
Best, and it really made for the best protest sign in history by far. But yeah, no, Democrats are notorious for actually doing town halls to even the detriment of their own safety.
Yeah.
So if you can't show up and do a town hall in person, then you're just a candy ass, as far as I'm concerned.
Now we're finding out more and more about January 6th. Evidently, there's some the website The Uprising has some new photo evidence that the former guy met with the CEO of this social media site that I've actually never heard of, called Clout Hub. Evidently, this guy was running Patriot caravans to Washington, D.C. And, I guess they met. They had a little powwow. I seem to remember that Trump was courting a bunch of social media sites to build the Trump Twitter. You think this was part of that?
No, he met with him before the insurrection, before the attack. So this idea that he was running Patriot caravans, we've had this conversation about who is funding all of these people coming to Washington. I think it was this guy. I think it was one of them. We know that Donald Trump spent a whole bunch of money out of his campaign when Women for Trump were at the helm of doing the whole rally. But whenever the Trump campaign took over, they started spending a whole lot of money getting a really, really big stage, a whole bunch of speakers and a tent and like all of this stuff. So, and I think that's whenever, maybe that's whenever he met with the Cloud dude and got him to pay some cash to bust some people in. Because
I misphrased that. I meant that he had done it beforehand, but recently he's met with some social media people to make the next Twitter. So was this the quid pro quo? Hey, you brought some folks down to my rally. You did all this stuff. You were a good little Trumpite. I'm gonna help you. To me, that was part of it. At least I think it was.
I don't know. I mean, I think Donald Trump doesn't necessarily do quid pro quos. He just does I will take everything from you that I want and not actually give you what you need. It's really just more like what can you do for me? And I don't really care about what your needs are. The only exception to that obviously was Ukraine, where he legitimately did offer something in return.
Yeah, but that was Congress had already allocated that.
Right.
And it wasn't actually his.
Right. Exactly. He was just using our money.
And it was going anyway. I mean, that was the weird part about it. Yeah, just crazy. I did want to get your thoughts on Mike Pence, though. Mike Pence was, I guess, in New Hampshire recently. Talked about the fact that he and Donald might not see eye to eye on what happened on January 6th. And I'll tell you, I don't know how you could, because they were actually chanting Pence's name to be the recipient of a noose tie where he would be dangling from. I think that's got to kind of sting a little bit. No,
you would think so. The interesting thing about Pence is that I think he's tried to have it both ways. After the election, he spent a lot of time talking to people and saying, it wasn't that terrible. It was fine. We worked it out. And that didn't really seem to work in terms of an actual PR thing. Like nobody really believed that. And everybody kind of turned against Mike Pence for basically saying that he was a wimp for kowtowing to Donald Trump after Donald Trump's people basically tried to kill him.
Yeah.
So he's in a no-win situation here. Either he complains about Donald Trump, complains about the fact that Donald Trump's supporter tried to kill him, or he placates to Donald Trump and Donald Trump's supporters, and he looks like a wimp. So he just, there's nowhere to go. And at this point, it's like if they're already talking about in 2024 replacing Pence on the ticket. So this is one of those things where Mike Pence may just try and figure out how to make the best book deal ever and try and make more money off of his book, and turn this into more of a financial thing rather than a political thing. Because I think, there's really nowhere else for him to go after this.
Yeah, if Trump runs, I don't see him pulling Pence again. I see him taking Ron DeSantis.
Yeah, or, I wouldn't be surprised if he did something like somebody from his family, because really
the daughter, Ivanka, so that he could resign and hand it over to her.
The one thing that has been consistent about him is he doesn't, even if it is somebody who pretends to be a loyalist, who purports to do everything for him that he possibly wants, there still is that element of distrust, and the one group of people that he does trust are his family. So I wouldn't be surprised if he was like, oh, we're going to pretend like, it's a real politician, but instead we're just going to put Ivanka in there.
Good point. I still think it's going to be DeSantis, but I see the Ivanka angle. I do. I see keep it in the family so that if something does happen, he falls ill, he gets bored, and he just wants to quit so he can go out as a winner instead of the loser that he is right now. Because this is the great part of this for me is all the chaos and all the trouble that he caused over the last 4 years. That he is a tortured man right now, because he wakes up every day going, I'm a loser.
Yeah. He's not just a loser. He lost the presidency. He lost his Twitter. He lost his Facebook. He lost his Instagram. He lost his Pinterest, his Snapchat, a whole slew of other sites, and now he's lost his blog too.
Oh,
tears.
So sad. Now you got me feeling bad for him.
Oh, come on.
But I would want to ask him a question. Do you think they should have hung Mike Pence on January 6th? I would like to get his answer to that.
I would love to hear his answer on that. Do you agree with your supporters that Mike Pence should be hanged?
Yeah, absolutely. Wanted to get your thoughts on the Simina thing. Did you see her with John Cronin and the?
Yes.
And is it just me? And I want to get a woman's perspective on this, because I watched her standing next to him and him kind of towering over her in kind of a weird, creepy, kind of controlling, bizarre dynamic way. Am I reading too much into that scenario? Or did you get the same vibe?
I got the exact same vibe, and I recognize that she is a petite person and John Cornyn is much taller, but this idea of a Republican in the GOP leadership who's basically just like looming over her, and she's spouting his talking points, it just wasn't it was a bad look. It was a really bad look. At the same time, what she was actually saying doesn't make any sense. Yeah, like that. And that's the same thing. It's not just unique to Kristen Sinema. It's Joe Manchin too. Both of them keep saying, oh, we support the filibuster, except they don't support the filibuster. If they did, we would actually have filibusters. And I tweeted this before I came on. The last filibuster that we had was Chris Murphy protesting, filibustering about gun reform in 2016. There have been a grand total of 10 filibusters in history. So if Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin want to protect the filibuster, then they should actually demand that we have a filibuster to begin with. They should make people come out and actually filibuster. What's happening now is Republicans are just anonymously threatening to have one. And that's not the way that government should work. And that's why things basically slow down to a complete crawl and nothing's happening in Congress.
Didn't Sanders filibuster at one point?
I looked up on the Wikipedia page, and Strom Thurmond was the first one in August of 57.
It was 2010. I didn't realize it was that long ago that.
Oh wow!
That
yeah.
Sanders.
Oh, there was a Jeff Merkley in 2017. If these were in order, life would be a lot easier.
Yeah.
So there was a 2017 one. 2016, there was a 92. There was a 2013.
But for me, I've been saying this
Ted
from the
Cruz.
beginning. Bring back the talking filibuster.
Yeah.
Explain to me why it is that you don't want this stuff passed. I want to hear why millionaire Republicans don't want to see workers get a minimum wage increase. I want to hear Republican senators talking about all of the things that they believe happened during the last election, and then bring it out and show the proof. I want you to tell me why you're against workers being able to organize. I want you to tell me why we can't have, 21st century infrastructure instead of this nonsense of, well, we've just decided we're not going to vote for it. And we didn't make cloture. I say you're going to filibuster, you filibuster till the end of time. If it's that important to shut things down, if it's important to not get something done, that's how it has to be done. Bring Mr. Smith back to Washington.
And that's exactly what Republicans want, right? They want to hide from this. They want to hide from accountability. And the reason that they're, embracing this kind of filibuster is because the last thing they want is for Americans to actually see what they think.
Right. And they're lazy.
Because when Americans...
This is a lazy filibuster.
Well,
do some damn work.
And it'd be really hard to stand that long whenever you're Mitch McConnell at 79 years old.
Do like the workers at Amazon have to do and dump in a bag when you got to go.
Yep, there you go.
If it means that much to you, if you're that invested in it, you got a podium.
Remember Ted Cruz reading Dr. Seuss?
Yeah.
He made it for 21 hours and 18 minutes in 2013, filibustering the Appropriations Act.
Good for him.
Reading Dr. Seuss.
Good. I don't know why Dr. Seuss was so important. I wanted to know why he was against the bill.
Yeah.
See, for me, this is where it should go. If you're against it, you got to tell me why. You got to no more reading the phone book or bringing out the Bible unless you can say, "Hey, this is why Jesus was against assault rifle bans." If you can point to why Jesus was against assault rifle bans, you can read it into the record. But otherwise, you got to talk about the issue.
I'm actually fine with them just reading the phone book because I think that looks even worse. The fact that they're sitting there and they refuse to tell you the reality.
If they pick the right page, maybe I can get my name in the congressional record. Okay,
there you go.
I see that.
It's your gift to America. People can send you fan mail.
There it is. Finally, I do have to get your thoughts on the big story that was yesterday that I haven't talked about, and that's the kid from Stanford who's going to be able to graduate. Finally, the kid from the law school kid, he put out some satire. I thought it was hysterical. He put out a flyer for the Stanford Federalist Society and their presentation of the originalist case for inciting insurrection. And look, I didn't disagree with what he wrote. It was great.
It was hilarious, and it was so very obvious that it wasn't real. So this idea that the Federalist Society was throwing a big fit over it is just immature. And the fact that they then complained to Stanford and filed a complaint against him as a student is even worse. And finally, Stanford released a statement. It took them 24 hours, essentially. The second that Mother Jones wrote the story, talking about the absurdity of all of this, Stanford was like, oh, crap. Right. Or maybe one of their lawyers came rushing into the office and was like, what the hell is wrong with you? What are you thinking? And what's funny that what happened today is Stanford Law School actually sent out a statement, and they were like, there are a bunch of people reporting that Stanford Law School was the one that was involved in this. We want to make it very clear we had nothing to do with this. This is all Stanford as a parent, law school. We're cool. We support First Amendment rights. Stanford, that's a whole other issue. It was so amazing. I was just like, good for you, Stan Law. Go for it.
No, it looked great. They had the RSVP from 12:45 to 2 on January 6th. They were giving out Grubhub coupons. They wrote, please join Stanford Federalist Society as we welcome Senator Joshua Hawley and Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton to discuss violent insurrection. Violent insurrection, also known as doing a coup, is a classical system of installing a government. Think of reinstalling for August. He goes on to say, although widely believed in conflict in every way with the rule of law, violent insurrection can be an effective approach to upholding the principle of limited government. Senator Hawley will argue that the ends justify the means. Attorney General Paxton will explain that when the Supreme Court refuses to exercise its Article 3 authority to overturn the results of a free and fair election, calling on a violent mob to storm the Capitol represents an appropriate alternative remedy. I don't know how you cannot read that and just see it oozing with sarcasm, especially since it was written on January 25th. But hey, it's Stanford University. Who knew?
You would think that they were smarter.
That's where the smart people are supposed to be.
That's what I'm saying. It's the Ivies. We expect better.
Yeah, there you go. As always, Sarah, I appreciate the time. Great stuff. Keep up the great work. Look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
You too, our good friend Sarah Burris. Make sure you check out her work over at RawStory. Wow, look at what time it is. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
A cargo ship that was on fire for weeks off the coast of Sri Lanka is now sinking, sparking fears of major ecological disaster.
Cargo ship carrying acid, oil, and plastic sinks off the coast of Sri Lanka. Man-made global warming to blame for 1/3 of global heat deaths, study finds. Plus,
President Biden is making good on a climate change promise.
Interior Department suspends oil and gas drilling in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge.
All of those promises kept and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Apparently, when Bernie goes on the road, Senator Sanders' staffers put together a list of Bernie's travel preferences. He required his room be kept at 60 degrees. In fact, Bernie was so adamant that the room temperature be low, he would go out of his way to keep it at 60, even if it meant opening a window in winter or manually overriding the hotel's climate control system. That must have been quite a phone call to the front desk. I believe in climate change, in that we have to change the climate of this room, or else I swear to God I will sleep in the ice machine. I need to wake up feeling like a flounder in a fish market.
This is your Green News Report.
Click!
Okay, Desi Doyen. Sorry, long snarky comment. What do you got for us today?
Well, first, a full-fledged environmental disaster is underway in Sri Lanka, where a stricken container ship carrying 25 tons of toxic nitric acid and 350 metric tons of oil has been burning for 2 weeks just off the coast. On Wednesday, the ship began to sink, unleashing what is becoming one of the worst ecological disasters in that country's history.
Wow.
Tons of tiny plastic pellets spilled from shipping containers that fell into the sea have swamped the island's coastline and fishing grounds, blanketing beaches as far as 75 miles to the south, with multiple reports of dead fish, birds, and sea turtles already washing up on shore. In climate news, a new study has calculated that more than 1/3 of the world's heat deaths each year are directly caused by man-made global warming. The international team of researchers examined heat deaths in more than 700 cities from 1991 to 2018, comparing observed temperatures with computer models, simulating a world without climate change, finding that nearly 40% of heat deaths were caused by higher temperatures intensified by human-caused global warming. In the U.S., more than 1,000 heat deaths a year, or about 35%, were attributed to climate change. A different U.S.-only study has found that power grid failures have nearly doubled in the U.S. since 2015 and calculated that the combination of blackouts and extreme heat, quote, may be the deadliest climate-related event we can imagine when indoor temperatures rise above 90 degrees Fahrenheit. The researchers found the risk from heat exposure is highest in low-income households that can't afford air conditioning. In an interview with CBS, study author Brian Stone of Georgia Tech said cooling centers in the 3 major cities they studied could only accommodate about 2% of the total population.
that really raises questions around what is the level of preparedness for what is a very high health risk and something that's immediate in terms of its timing. This is not, decades into the future. This is this summer.
I will answer that question. We're not prepared at all.
Another new analysis finds that the record winter storm that devastated Texas in February, causing a massive power outage, killed hundreds more people than the official state tally. A new analysis conducted by BuzzFeed News calculated that the true number of people killed by the storm and the blackout is likely 4 or 5 times higher than the 100 or so deaths the state has officially acknowledged so far.
We're talking about hundreds killed.
Yes. Intensifying drought spreading across the U.S. West has set in motion water cutbacks on the Colorado River. Some cutbacks to Arizona and Nevada had already begun, but late last week, the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation warned Arizona and Nevada to brace for further cuts. Sparse snowpack this winter melted quickly during the hot, dry spring, producing little runoff, helping to deplete reservoirs across the region. Lake Powell on the Colorado River is at just a third of its capacity. Lake Mead near Las Vegas is at just 38% of capacity. If it falls to 22%, Arizona will lose its entire allotment.
Wow.
Finally, some good news.
Thank you.
The Biden Interior Department has suspended all Trump-era oil and gas leases in Alaska's pristine Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, pending a reassessment of environmental impacts of drilling in the region. The department suspended nearly a dozen leases on the grounds that Trump officials rushed the lease auction and did not follow proper procedures, including required environmental reviews, violating the National Environmental Policy Act. The suspension will require a new environmental analysis, which will be time-consuming and is also likely to spark a lengthy court battle.
Bring it on. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
So the story today, F. Lee Bailey died. F. Lee Bailey, famous for the O.J. Simpson case. Also Patty Hearst, whole bunch of other stuff. He was like, one of the celebrity, criminal attorneys, for decades. Honestly, I thought he was already dead, but he died on June 3rd in Atlanta, 87 years old. Yeah, there you go. Like I said, didn't even know he was still around. But rest in peace there, F. Lee. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day, our good friend, former Ohio Congressman and political analyst, Bob Ney. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thanks, Rick. You're killing me.
Why?
Because, I'll just be candid. I thought the same thing, but I would not have admitted it. I thought he was dead, but I would just not have admitted it if I was doing a radio show.
No, he was old. He was old.
No, I mean yeah, I know.
I mean, he was old and decrepit back during the O.J. trial. And how many decades ago was that?
Well, he started with the famous case of Sam Shepard in your neck of the woods up in Cleveland.
Yep.
Yes.
No, he got himself into a lot of those things, and he made quite a name for himself. Made quite a bit of money off of being famous.
Patty Hearst, he did the Patty Hearst case. Yeah.
But yeah, I saw them. Like, wow, that's sad. I
thought he had passed too. So.
All right, good. So I'm glad I'm not the only one.
Well, yeah, I just wasn't going to admit it.
Yeah, I don't know everything.
I've done that on Facebook where somebody posts something that so and so died, and I'm like, wow, that's a shame. I'll repost it, and then a friend will say, Bob, that was 3 years ago. I'm like, oops. Okay.
See, I didn't know about it 3 years ago. I didn't know about it today. Just getting around a little bit behind.
There you go.
Let's get into some news. Evidently, the governor of South Dakota not happy. Kristi Noem. She's all upset at the federal judge who's not going to let her blow off her firecrackers at the at Mount Rushmore.
Yes. Who took the case? the Fed case?
Roberto Lang, I guess, is the Federal District Court of South Dakota.
Okay. Okay. I didn't know who initiated that. So.
Yeah, I'm like, so you do it on public land. If the feds aren't going to let you do it, and I don't know why, because it doesn't give a reason why, other than safety concerns, and of course, the local native tribes who live around there probably weren't thrilled either. But that seems to be the game.
Yeah, she sued the governor sued to be able to do the fireworks on Mount Rushmore. Now they do fireworks in D.C., but I think that's with agreement wherever they do it.
So, got to get your thoughts on Mike Pence. The story today, Mike says he's probably never going to see eye to eye with the former guy, but he's proud of the work that they did, proud of the Capitol Police for doing the whole saving his behind thing. Thoughts?
Well, what he's done here is in a Mike Pence way. I served with Mike Pence, in the Congress and know him and. How he operates. He's kind of like the sort of subdued chill factor for the most part. Unless it comes to certain issues. When he was governor, he wasn't subdued. But this is his way of coming out and saying, he completely has a problem or disagrees with the fact that the president kind of said, go down to the Capitol and get Pence. So this is his way of just saying that, he's not going to see eye to eye, quote, with the president. Meaning that he knows that what happened at the Capitol was wrong, and It wasn't a bunch of tourists taking pictures. Is what he's saying.
As I said earlier, I would like to ask, Donald Trump, if he really wanted Mike Pence hung, because I look at Pence and I'm going, I guess if it were me and there were a couple thousand people chanting my name, wanting to put a noose around my neck and hang me, I think I'd be a little bit more upset than this.
I would. So I said Mike Pence's, quote, chill style. But, when you look at the issue of Pence himself, and I did a radio show, and the show I did, the host of the show said, well, can Pence alter the outcome? This is before this all happened, right? And on the show, I said no. And people on the Facebook page of this radio show were coming on saying, you've turned, you're not telling the truth. And no matter what I said, there were people that said, that's not true, he can change it. Everybody knew he couldn't change it.
Right.
Everybody,
especially
including
him.
Trump when he said it.
Yeah, especially him.
I'd have been a bit more disturbed about what happened if I was him.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I mean, we're seeing more and more, this Maggie Haberman stories come out, and there have been people who have verified that Trump actually believes he's going to be reinstalled in August, along with Martha McSally and David Perdue. They're going to be reinstalled. Is there anywhere in our Constitution is there a reinstallment clause? Is there a kind of a redo button? Is there a Staples easy button somewhere in the Constitution?
No, I mean, they keep saying this. And Sidney Powell, the attorney who was with Giuliani and them and the whole crew for a while, I think she made a reference to this just about a week ago again, about this reinstall deal. And there are people out there that actually believe this is potentially going to happen. I honestly, I cannot believe that anyone would believe this. It just baffles me.
Is there a point at which where the University of North Carolina rescinds her law degree?
They ought to be investigated for her passing the law courses. Probably.
Yeah, I mean, because probably. It's kind of weird that you've got this woman who at one point was potentially an esteemed attorney like Giuliani. I mean, at one point, he was someone that people looked up to. And now they're right in with the rest of the conspiratorial kooks that have been running around.
But I mean, this was about 4 or 5 days ago. She said this, and I'm looking at that, and you're right. If you look at her history, I mean, she actually had sort of a law practice, I guess you could say, and of course, Rudy Giuliani was the nation's mayor, et cetera, and then just went down the hill. But I can't imagine. 4 days ago, she actually said that, and how, it's sort of like people that predict, on August 20th, 2021, at 5 o'clock, the world's going to end.
Yes. I'm glad you said that. I said that yesterday. I lived through the 80s where every couple of years someone came up, no, I got the decoder ring. We now know when it's going to be. And every couple of years, it was the end of the world until 2000. After 2000, I haven't heard the end of the world thing too often. But exactly, that's where I went the other day.
Yeah, and then, I used to tell friends, I used to write the date down, and I would say to friends of mine, it didn't happen. It didn't happen. Yeah. It's just like when they said, I think Powell also, or somebody like her, at one point in time said that, I think it was February or March something, Trump was going to be, reinstated.
It was March.
Yeah, something like that.
The original inauguration day. We were going to go back to that.
And you go back to these people, and it's just like, well, no, it's going to happen in August now. I don't know. I had somebody actually working at one of my flips, and he started to ask me, questions, and all of a sudden I realized this is a conspiracy guy, and I told him there is not going to be a reinstatement. It will not happen this year or the next 4 years. I said, if you're going to see Trump in the White House again, it's because he'll run and he would have to get elected. Right. He's not going to be placed into office. It's just, it blows my mind that anybody can think like this.
No, it's crazy. And just like going back to the 80s, I remember I used to go up to these people on the street corner who were up on their soapbox preaching that the end of the world is coming. And I used to just go to them, give me all your money. If you believe that tomorrow's the end of the world, give me all your stuff. I'll hold on to it for you.
Right.
It's remarkable, but I guess I've got my calendar circled August 1st, and then we can play the countdown to the reinstatement, which I guess would have to come by military coup, and that's already, I guess, on the table thanks to to Mike Flynn.
Right. And he was saying something the other day at some kind of rally. But, people like Sidney Powell and Rudy Giuliani, they will go make some more money off of some kind of goofy think tank somewhere or nonprofit that's got money that, hires these people to consult. There's always some kind of crazy group out there with money that will hire them. I mean, they've ruined themselves in the mainstream of working anytime again with any type of legitimate law firm.
Yeah, but there's some billionaire out there who's funded one of these coup tanks.
Sure.
Look, Mike Pence is working at the Heritage Foundation. Yeah, you need a job. I guess shilling for them is as good as any you can get on the right.
Right. True.
Dangerous, crazy stuff. Wanted to get your thoughts moving across the other side of the world. What's going on in Israel? Is Netanyahu in? Is he out? Did he make it? What's going on there?
Well, I'm glad you brought this up because now he's throwing President Biden into the mix is what he's doing. Netanyahu, who, many times I've said that he's got, 10 or 11 political lives. And it didn't look good for him. He was just on the edge of getting out. And the whole Israeli-Palestinian Gaza deal all blew up, right? And over the evictions and the mosque and the soldiers going in, etc. And as strictly a result of that, Netanyahu remained. Now, don't you think it kind of coincides with, remember, as we've watched this the last month, Netanyahu didn't want a ceasefire. He didn't want it to stop, right?
Yep.
Because once it stopped, guess what happened? This coalition was put together. A coalition of, you want to talk about groups that don't belong talking to each other. You've got people who support a Palestinian state. You had Orthodox Jewish people. You had right-wingers, etc., all come together as soon as the ceasefire came about to say Netanyahu's got to go. They had one cause. One of the people in the group said that about his whether he was mentally fit, and the other said that it was a national problem, him remaining. So all of the groups came together to say, you've got to go. Now, today, Netanyahu, in a political meeting, said to allies that they need to push the talking point that the prime minister-to-be, Naftali Bennett, would not be able to stand up to President Biden on Iran or fend off U.S. pressure on the Palestinian issue. So this is the Hail Mary out there that he's throwing, which is President Biden. That's his Hail Mary.
You're going to throw Biden under the bus. Well,
you think it's going to work? After Biden called him and was, consoling on his side of it. No, it's not going to work. Because Israel and the political forces to be in Israel are not going to sit there and say, oh, okay, we've got to fight President Biden, and Netanyahu's right, we've got to do this. They're not going to buy into that. And they don't have to buy into that, because there's nothing that President Biden has done that has put any of them in jeopardy. He's talking to Iran. I know they don't like that. Well, I shouldn't say they. Netanyahu doesn't like that. Some people are okay with it, some aren't. So I think this is his Hail Mary, Rick. I think he's finally he's done, and I think this is the Hail Mary that, if you don't put me back in, you can't stand up to Biden.
Yeah, he's been there forever.
Oh yes.
I mean, it's been he's had a long run.
Yes, he's been there. He was back there when Clinton was president, because I was in a meeting with Paul Kanjorski. You remember Paul from Pennsylvania? I was in a meeting with Netanyahu, Sheila Jackson Lee, Paul Kanjorski, and I, where I'm not going to get you thrown off the air, so I won't repeat what Kanjorski and Netanyahu said to each other. Put it that way.
I'm sure it was not.
It was colorful. Let me just say that.
I can imagine. Well, we'll see how it plays. I'm interested to see where this goes. I just
thought it was interesting him using Biden, as the last ditch, because, like I said, Biden as president has not done anything to go in and just disrupt Israel.
Yeah, but Trump and the right have done a pretty good job of beating up the Democrats on the issue and being weak on Iran and all of that.
Right.
So I mean, it seems like some logic would go into it that if you got one shot left, that's where it would go.
Right.
Crazy.
I just don't think it'll work.
I wanted to get your thought on this story in Surry County, North Carolina. Evidently, in the tiny county in North Carolina, they have banned all Coca-Cola machines from the county. No more Coke. It is now a dry. It's a Pepsi-only county.
Well, let's see. So they banned the Coke vending machines, right? And that's very interesting. So this is a result of the
voting thing.
The voting thing. Okay.
Coke and Nike and a couple other companies had a big video call, and they came out with a letter condemning Georgia for their attack on voting rights. And now this is the beginning. It's going to be a landslide. A bunch of crazy conservative counties are going to be banning Coke. Pepsi is going to buy Pepsi stock. I guess that's the hot tip.
Because Coke is too left wing, right?
That's right.
Okay. All right. It's very interesting, Rick, this entire back and forth, left and right, whichever side. Very interesting, the whole corporate. Can you imagine sitting in a corporation and all of a sudden in one state you're a lefty and we're going to ban you, in the other state you're a righty and we're going to ban you.
And you know who I blame? You know who I blame for this?
Who?
I blame them. They should have stayed the hell out of politics. They shouldn't have been funding ALEC. They shouldn't be funding politicians. They should be running their businesses. As soon as they started introducing themselves and becoming players in the game, there are consequences to play in the game.
Well, a lot of companies, as you know, have now stopped even the PAC contributions. They've stopped it.
Yeah, I mean, because eventually somebody pays attention. And this is, look, the right is convinced. They're convinced that the election was stolen, and any company that wants people to vote, they're boycotting. And maybe this is a good thing. Maybe this is the moment where corporations stay out of it.
Right.
Just my
well, like
thought.
I said, I know a lot of them have undone their packs.
Yeah, well.
Or suspended them.
Good, but if you're in Surrey County, North Carolina, no Coke, Bob.
I don't drink Coke or Pepsi, so it doesn't matter.
Gonna have to then drink Fanta.
Right. There you go.
But I appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you, Rick.
Good stuff. Our good friend Bob Ney. Let's take a quick break. Right back to wrap things up. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1900. That was the day that the International Lady Garment Workers Union was formed in New York City by 7 local unions. While men held nearly all of the leadership roles in the early days of the union, most of the workers were Jewish women. One woman who rose through the ranks of the union's leadership was Fanya Kohn. She was a Russian Jewish immigrant who worked as a sleeve maker. She helped to organize an ILGWU local at her workplace in New York. By 1916, she was elected as a vice president for the union. She was the first woman to hold that position. She made labor education programs her top priority, helping to found a workers' university at Washington Irving High School. Distinguished professors visited and gave lectures. In 1920, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics called the school, quote, the first systematic scheme of education undertaken by organized labor in the United States. Fanya expanded her educational efforts on the East Coast from Boston to Philadelphia, and to the West as far as Cleveland and Chicago. In 1919, 800 members had taken part in one of the courses. Classes included subjects such as public speaking, health, and literacy. Fanya helped to found the Brookwood Labor College in New York, the first residential workers' college in the United States. Fanya often met with obstacles within her union. She believed workers deserved a broad education that included stimulating culture and intellectual content. Many of the male leaders in the union wanted more narrow education focused on union matters. Despite this opposition, the ILGWU became an important force for social justice unionism within the United States labor movement. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is...
So no Coke in Surrey County, North Carolina. And look, this is eventually where it has to get to where the penalties for corporate America to get involved in this stuff, becomes, they've done this to themselves. They've funded enormous lobbying campaigns. They're all doing all of this stuff, and now that the pressure, and it's interesting that the right wing is now going, we've been milking you for decades to fund every right-wing organization and every attack group out there, from the American Legislative Exchange Council to the Heritage Foundation to the state policy networks to all of these different groups that push right-wing ideology. Now, finally, they do something like, we do think people should be able to vote, and it's probably gone a bit too far. Now the right is losing their ever-loving freaking minds over the fact that they would have the audacity to speak out and say, we think people should be able to vote. And they're going to ban it. And look, I'm okay with that. You shouldn't be drinking so much soda anyway. Something that I gave up a couple years ago, and been doing fairly well on. So there you go. Tomorrow on the program, I'm going to share get some thoughts on what the Biden administration has done with the TSA, the idea of giving workers collective bargaining rights. full collective bargaining rights. I think pretty important. We're going to get to some of that. Also, our weekly panel. Going to have our panel discussion as well. You're not going to want to miss that. If you missed any of today's program, you can download the podcast at the website. Get the app on your smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you're going. As always, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at